And we are live again, and we're back with Adam Rang, who is going to do an interview with an amazing person who is also a former world chess champion and a political activist, Garry Kasparov. Is that correct? Garry Kasparov? Do I say it
Yeah,
right?
that's a Russian pronunciation. Though in America they often say Garry Kasparov, so and that's why I pay no attention to the pronunciation.
I have the same thing with my name. I'm called Iria, and it's very difficult to travel around the world and get people to say my name. So, Garry, it's really cool to have you on the live stream, and I'd like to start with a question before you guys start the chat. Why did you decide to join in on this global hackathon?
I think it's a unique opportunity to use these circumstances, mobilizing talent around the world. I was always a staunch supporter of free market and free minds, and I think it's our chance now to change the atmosphere in the business world, and also to give an opportunity for young talented innovators to present their ideas. People think we live in an era of these greatest technological progress, but if you're objective and if you look at what has been achieved 30, 40 years ago, you'll understand that now we are doing mostly incremental things, no big breakthroughs, and I hope that hackathon will help us not only to make certain improvements. It will go without saying, I'm no doubt about it, but also maybe we'll find a real gem just in this field of sparkling ideas.
Amazing! I'm glad that we got you on board. Adam, take it away.
Yeah, so Garry, it's an honor to have you with us online at least. So where in the world are you right now?
I'm in New York in my apartment.
Okay. And,
where else I could be? Yes.
So Garry, you've been warning for years now that winter is coming and we should deal with challenges as early as possible because the price of inaction is always higher later. It seems that this pandemic is another example of inaction in many ways so far. But what do you think the consequences of our inaction will be this time?
Look, as a professional chess player in my previous life, so I used to analyze games to find mistakes I made or my opponents made, to be prepared for the next challenge. And right now, as you correctly stated, we are seeing the consequence of our inactions. And they're both political and technological, I even would say cultural. So political is that for many years, the free world lived under the impression that globalization could solve all the problems. And we can incorporate countries like China, Russia, and other non-democratic regimes around the world into this global trade, global communication, and it will help to democratize these countries and will help people in these countries to get more rights and to be part of this global process. To the contrary, what we got, and I've been warning about it for years, is that regimes like Putin's Russia or Chinese communist dictatorship, they benefited from this exchange, but without showing a slightest sign of improving situation with human rights and democracy at home. To the contrary, they used, in many cases, the willingness of the free world to negotiate any deal with these regimes to put even more pressure on the citizens in these countries. Today, pandemic, we know, was originated in China, and most likely it came from a lab in Wuhan that has been studying this virus, these colonial viruses for at least 6 years. And the reason why it could escape not only the lab but city of Wuhan in China is that Chinese government decided to cover up the story and not to share the information at early days, which could prevent global pandemics. That's another problem with authoritarian regimes, that they should look intact, infallible, and then they're not recognizing any mistakes. And the price we're paying now, it's a result of our unwillingness to confront Chinese or Russian authorities or other authoritarian regimes with their records. pointing out that these lies are just threatening us. That's one side of the story, and I'm happy to develop to share even more thoughts on that. But the other side is technology. We live in a world where stock market has been dominating business for at least last 2 decades, and the reason is that the horizon of planning is much shorter. The stock market punished every company that invested heavily in R&D because research and development are not improving the company balance sheet. And one of the results, most, if not all, pharmaceutical companies dramatically cut money spent on research. And of course, the first victims were all new medicine related to viruses. It's the vaccinations, antibiotics. It all has been cut because it was not profitable enough from the market's point of view, and it was potentially risky because if you do something wrong, you have army of lawyers to go after you and just to threaten your business. So that's why we could see the shift in pharmacology in the direction of chronic illness like heart attacks and diabetes, which is also important, cancer, but at the expense of immediate threats. And now again, we're paying the price. So my expectations, actually, I hope that we will recognize mistakes were made and we'll start, reorganizing our life, because we need to utilize the advantages of the free market, of the free minds, and that's what I liked about hackathon. So that's global hackathon. That it brings people in, and it destroys, it topples the walls between markets and inventors, because we have also overgrown bureaucracy that is always standing on the way. And let's leave it for China or Russia or for non-democratic countries. Here we have to celebrate the power of the free mind. And I think that now it's as a bare necessity. We have no choice but to go back to the roots of the free market.
So Garry, you've been a champion of democracy and so I've got the feedback coming back here. You've been a champion of democracy. You've been a thorn in the side of authoritarian regimes. But then there's a big challenge here for entrepreneurs, especially a lot of those taking part in the global hack, in terms of if they're designing global products and yet they want to roll those out in countries where, there may not be freedom of information, they may have to make compromises locally. How do they navigate that complex geopolitical minefield?
Look, it's a big issue, but it's that I have been always fighting against double standards. And I find it unacceptable when, let's say, a company like Apple is standing its ground against FBI in the United States, denying the request to open a phone of a terrorist, because again, this is they cite American laws, and it's protection of the technology and privacy of millions of other people, and at the same time willingly shares information of tens of millions of their users with Chinese government. I understand it's about business, but it's also about the indifference to the lives and well-being of people who are not so happy to live in a free world. I understand that the collection of data is not something that people welcome, though they do nothing about it. But still, there's a difference between data collection of Google, Apple, or Facebook and KGB or Chinese intelligence. What we should do is actually to put more pressure on these corporations and to make sure that they will behave as responsible players of the free market, and also companies that operate in the free market and use the benefits of the free market and free society, and make sure that all the actions that will harm people, no matter where these people live, Russia, Iran, China, Turkey, Estonia, United States, United Kingdom, these rights will be protected. I've been doing many events with Avast Software over the last 3 years, and I've been emphasizing this point, which is absolutely vital in my view, just to make sure that the concerns about business will not prevail over concern about well-being of people who will be victims of such policies. Because if your information is collected by Google, you can get the unwanted advertising. and maybe some other minor, problems in your life, and you may not feel good about it. But still, I repeat, people do very little, if anything, about it. So they still want convenience over safety. But the collection of data in Russia, Turkey, or Iran, or China, I mean, it could be a matter of life and death. And the fact is that many leading Western corporations that are on the front line of these new technologies, they ignore it. I mean, it bothers me a lot. And I hope that the current crisis will help us to work out a new framework of this global cooperation that will not continue at the expense of 60% of people of this planet that today still live in the unfree world.
That's a lot to think about. And I should remind everyone, actually, that you can ask your questions if you're watching live as well. Just leave your questions below and I'll read them out as well. Garry, a lot of people in this hackathon are working on ideas around AI, which is a specialist subject of yours. Many people know about your chess game against Deep Blue in 1997. That was 23 years ago. How has AI progressed since then?
I always remind people that there were two matches, actually. The first I won in 96 in Philadelphia. Second, I lost in New York in 1997. But it's a mistake to consider Deep Blue any form of AI. I mean, Deep Blue was as intelligent as your alarm clock, though it was a very expensive one, $10 million piece. But people, always thought machines doing some sort of, intellectual work. And as the AI breakthrough, though in chess or in any other game, like Go or shogi, Japanese chess, or any video games, you don't need AI. At the end of the day, the reason machines dominate all these games, it's not because machines are intelligent, simply because they make fewer mistakes. To beat top players in chess, for instance, machine doesn't have to solve the game, which is virtually impossible because the number of legal moves in the game of chess is 10 to the 46th power. So that's just goes beyond any ability of any machine in the known universe to the end of time. But it's not about solving the game. It's about making fewer mistakes and capitalizing on mistakes made by humans. So that's why the gap between people and computers, human players and computers, in all these games is growing. But it doesn't bother me too much because I understand that in anything that can be classified as a closed system, and every game is a closed system, even Texas Hold'em poker is a closed system, machines will eventually dominate. So the human advantage is to understand how we can shift information from one closed system to another one, because machines are so far helpless, and I think will be for a long time helpless in the open-ended systems when the information is shifted and it's information accumulated in one system cannot be simply transferred to another. Machines always struggle with that. Though today we see some real improvements from the old machines that did what I called optimization. Now we are moving slowly to transformation phase, and it's the pioneer here is AlphaZero, the DeepMind program led by Demis Hassabis under Google's umbrella. And AlphaZero, it was a revolutionary algorithm that pushed things to a new level. This is how a machine operates in the closed system by knowing all the rules without any human input, and just starting from the scratch creates its own database of ideas and operates from there. That's a very interesting opportunity for humans actually to learn from machines' angle of observation. Ironically, actually, it's very few people remember that the first program of that type has been developed in IBM by Gerald Tsaro in early 90s in backgammon. But because of success of Deep Blue, which was an old traditional program doing just calculations, the program of this backgammon program has been abandoned, and 20 plus years later, Google team actually picked it up and moved forward.
Garry, will machines be able to replicate human creativity in art or writing, for example?
The answer is no, but some people say, why not? I mean, it depends, how you qualify art, because, modern art has many forms. And while I don't know about your taste, but I'm a bit reluctant to consider, some of the latest forms of modern art, equal to the classical masterpieces. So if machine does something in art or directs a movie, I'm sure there will be enough people around the world, maybe a few millions, who may like it. Because at the end of the day, just again, people's tastes are different. And we know that today people could be dragged by some of the most ridiculous and let's say unconventional ideas. But if we're talking about the quality art, I've my not just doubts. I don't think it can happen, because the art means creativity, but creativity also means that you accept the notion of failure. You start doing something new, and you may fail. Failure is not acceptable by the machine to the machines, just by definition, because machines always look for the best pattern or best outcome of a certain line. And I think that that creates sort of a borderline, and I don't know how machines can cross it.
I can see one particular area of interest at the Global Hack has been around fighting misinformation online, which is probably one of the clearest examples of how this kind of technology can be misused. What is your advice for people who want to take on this enormous challenge?
It not will be misused. It has been misused for quite a while. And again, we could see who are the perpetrators of this technology. It's Russia, most likely China, but not so obvious, and other regimes like Saudi Arabia or Iran that have been aggressively pursuing their agenda by using technology invented in the free world. Russia, of course, is leading. We know that for more than 15 years, Putin's cronies have been building this industry of fake news and troll factories. They started in Russia, undermining Russian opposition. They moved to other countries. Estonia was one of the first victims of these attacks. And then they spread their evil influence around the world, eventually attacking the United States, and successfully attacking, because they got their candidate elected in 2016. It's quite ironic that technology that was invented in the free world has been aggressively used by non-democratic countries to undermine the very foundation of the free world. And I've been thinking about it, and again, at many conferences, I have been asked this question and met experts and talked to my friends in Avast Software and other experts in the United States. There's no simple solution, because it's you always end up by confronting the simple response of protecting free speech. So it's a free speech. How can you stop it if people spread information around, and how you can separate bad news from real ones? I think the only way to move forward is to rank sources. You have to look at the source. I understand, it sounds maybe too political, but why on earth you should consider Russia Today or Sputnik or just two major foreign-based outlets of Putin's propaganda reliable sources? So, and then you have so many sources that have been compromised because they lied so often. So I think you should look at the sources and recognize that some of the sources, they have to be labeled as sources that are just are not trustworthy, and they already have a reputation of lying. That's the best way to move forward. Otherwise,
So why have platforms like Twitter been so ineffective at rooting out this problem?
Yeah, but it's an issue for, obviously it should start with Google and Facebook, because those are just two most popular platforms that have been used. Twitter is also, but I think Twitter is less. It's because Twitter is used to spread information, but it's when you look at the concentrated attacks on certain segments of population, it's Facebook or YouTube. While while they say they're trying to solve these problems, I don't think they can succeed unless they agree with what I just said. They have to rank the sources. Yes, we have to recognize that we are, whether we like it or not, we live at a time of a war. It's hybrid war. It's cyber war. But for Putin or for Chinese or for other non-democratic regimes, for all the thugs and terrorists, it's a war. And I think our first problem is we don't want to recognize that we're facing this challenge. It's a problem that when you talk to Europeans who live in Eastern Europe, in the Baltics, and those who live with Western Europe, you could see a very different approach, because while people who live in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, they have a genetic memory of what can happen if you appease a dictator, and on the other side you have Western Europeans that are trying to practice a new modern form of appeasement, thinking that okay, any negotiation is better than confrontation. Though you cannot stop the war if somebody else started it, and Putin views every compromise as a sign of weakness. And we know where we are now after 15 or even more years of compromises, which there were simply concessions that Putin gladly took and moved forward.
And you have a deep knowledge of Russian affairs. How do you see Russia being changed potentially by this crisis?
Look, people are concerned that this crisis will help non-democratic regimes because they will show more effectiveness in dealing with it. I doubt very much, because I think that the free world will show more resilience and also more creativity. But while China so far managed to stop the outbreak in the country, though looking at the numbers from China and looking at the curves of Chinese of number of cases and death, I think they're lying, most likely, because I trust statistics, and it seems that Chinese results are just too good to be true. If you compare, for instance, to neighboring Taiwan, that is far more effective in dealing with healthcare. But in any case, China somehow managed to keep it under control. I'm not surprised, because, as I said, they have been studying these kind of viruses for many, many years. It's a known fact. They had many publications in scientific magazines worldwide. So I'm quite surprised that the free media has not gone to the bottom of that, asking questions that are so obvious. But as for Russia, situation here, it's not as rosy for the regime as Putin expected a month ago. It seems that they underestimated the threat, and now Putin had to abandon the so-called referendum on April 22nd, the one that had to give him, life tenure in power. So it was a shift from authoritarian rule to a one-man dictatorship that he planned to install after April 22nd, and also May 9th parade. It's a Victory Day parade, and Putin expected leaders from the free world joining him. It's like being there would be like a stamp of approval of his new dictatorship mantle. It seems that both events now are off. Definitely April 22nd, most likely the parade. Though he may push the parade, but he will be there probably alone, standing on the platform and receiving it. And it could be a biological bomb if he does it, because we understand what happens when you have tens of thousands of people gathering at the time where a virus is far from being defeated. And also there was a big failure in the oil prices war with Saudis. Putin just yesterday had to acknowledge that Russia would go to drastic cuts in production, and it could seriously hurt the financial stability in the country. We are hearing the news that actually last night that Russian government is planning now to introduce price regulations, and that will lead to a deficit in the stores. That will remind people of the last days of the Soviet Union. It seems now that it's the first time that Putin is totally out of touch with reality, and people see it. It's even in some of the loyal publications in Russia on the internet, there are doubts about the wisdom of the supreme leader, and that's really a bad sign. I don't want to be over optimistic, but it seems that the events now are just spinning out of his control, and that gives us hope that maybe Russia eventually will change its course.
And Garry, at the Global Hack, we're also looking beyond this crisis. Like, what other black swan events could should we be thinking about and preparing for?
Look, it's the black swans. They are, they call it for a good reason. That's they appear unexpectedly. But I think we understand that we have to look at the different kind of threats and analyze the origins of the threats. Viruses are just that's one of the most obvious challenges, because it was not actually a black swan. We have been hearing about for a long time. For several years, I have been working with Oxford Martin School as a visiting fellow, and I run a few seminars there and workshops. And I remember it was 2014, I think. I had a seminar there with a workshop actually with their leading experts on medical and biological research, and it was absolutely clear. And they just they had this joint opinion that superbugs were just most natural threat. And one of the problems that the safety regulations in the drug industry prevented new drugs being introduced. I remember the man who ran the lab where Alexander Fleming came up with a penicillin bluntly said that penicillin today would be banned at the first test because too many people show allergy. So we just have to recognize that the balance shifted, and we have to open the floodgates, and just for the creativity we have to use this massive talent around the world to look for new ideas. It's not about predicting black swans, but it actually has as many white swans as we can to counter when it comes. And as I mentioned in the beginning of our conversations, we live in a world with incremental changes. Yeah, it's all good, but it's 50 years ago, we had Apollo 11 making history in July 1969. Actually, in the same year, on October 29th, was the first signal on ARPANET sent from UCLA to Stanford. So those were revolutionary changes. 50 years later, in 2019, we celebrated the appearance of iPhone 11, and that's not the same. So it doesn't create the same sense of revolutionary progress. Yes, it's a bit better, it's more sophisticated, but it's still the same device. I think we have to just stop doing horizontal progress and look for the vertical. And while we'll do some certain risky things, and naturally many projects will fail, but that's the beauty of the free market. There will be 1,000 failures, one success, but this one success will help us to counter new black swans that will be inevitably flying from every directions in the future.
And Garry, I think if you can still hear me, so you're a track lead for work at the Global Hack. What are your predictions for the future of work, and how do you think that's going to be shaped by this crisis as well as technology in general?
Yeah, just going back to the question you asked about AI, and as one of the big concerns is its work and and jobs that will disappear, and people, keep complaining about technology that is threatening their livelihood. I always say that it's quite ironic that technology is the main reason while so many people are still alive to complain about technology. We just don't recognize how many benefits we got from technology. And today, I think a lot of people would be happy to see robots working on the streets. So it definitely creates sort of a new vision for the future. And we have to recognize that certain processes that we thought were too fast, they're actually too slow. So we just have to move forward with further computerization and robotization of our economies, because it helps us to prevent the dramatic shutdowns as today. Yes, maybe we have to consider UBI, universal basic income. Maybe we have to find some certain ways of helping people left behind. But we should also recognize that most of the jobs today, they do not fit this future vision. The research of American job market a couple of years ago, made by McKinsey, showed that only 4% of working activities in the United States require medium human creativity. I can repeat, medium human creativity, only 4% of working activities. And that means that 96% of jobs, they are just ready to go to the chopping block of automation. It's I call them zombie jobs. They're dead, they just don't know about it. So for many decades, we have been trying to make people work like machines. It was like people were rewarded, saying, "Oh, you're working like a machine." Now we just have to move in the opposite direction. We need human creativity that could go beyond known, and that's what I like about this concept now, because we're forced to start from the scratch and give opportunity to these talents, these teams around the world that would have no chance in the established world order. What would be the chance of these people to get through and just to knock to the doors and to be heard by authorities, if not for this disaster? So I think that as every disaster, it has its cost, but it also it's some sort of injection of reality, and that will help us to recognize that we have to start thinking long term about the future, about everything. So about climate challenges, about jobs, and about the structure of our society, how it will work, because that's the big advantage of democracy. We can make long-term planning because we have continuity. You can have one government and then another government, and they could stick with a course that is supported by majority. Dictatorships have no luxury of that type, because it's all about dictator and his cronies staying in power. So instead of playing the game, tactical game, exchanging the shots with non-democratic regimes, we have to start thinking long term. And now it's a great moment to demonstrate what is the power of free minds and what is the power of free market.
So long term, you're still very
We lost you for a bit, Adam. I think you need to repeat.
I'm here.
Long term, you're still very optimistic about the future.
Look, I'm incorrigible optimist by nature. So I believe that the humanity will win as a race. There are always losers and winners. But if you recognize that we live on the same planet and there are billions of us, I think as a race we'll be always winning with new ideas, new revolutionary ideas. Though there's a cost, we just have to recognize that bringing back risk in making it's absolutely vital. You cannot have safety pass that will move you from A to B and then to C and then to all the way down to Z. It's always risky, But the good news is that a lot of people are willing to take this risk. We just have to let them do that. We have to restore our space exploration programs. We have to restore our studies of the deep seas, because there's so many things we can discover there. I don't know exactly what we'll find out if we decide to fly to Mars, but we definitely find something that is not being expected. So the history of humanity tells us that when you look back and this history timeline, that the side effect of exploration was always phenomenal. It always helped us to come up with some ideas that we, that were so striking, that went beyond our wildest dreams. So we just have to recruit these human genius back to work, and to make sure that they will not be limited by the bureaucracies and by the fear of society of taking risk, and looking for safety paths.
Speaking of kind of like taking risks, people often use chess metaphors to talk about business or politics. Are you a bit tired of those comparisons, or are there genuine?
Look, it's flattering. I just I don't want to say that I'm tired, but what bothers me when people use it, just out of context completely. But it shows the reputation of the game of chess. It's a reputable game, and people are always happy to compare general intelligence to ability of playing chess.
And chess is one game you can play quite easily remotely during the lockdown. So I guess now is a good time to start learning if you haven't already.
Most of the games you can play remotely, but definitely for chess is quite a good opportunity now to spread out, because people are stuck at the screen. So naturally, chess will be one of the beneficiaries.
And Garry, before we go, your work track is being sponsored by eResidency, Estonia's eResidency program. Are you interested in becoming an eResident yourself?
Look, I think I have, just my registration is in Estonia, because we have been traveling regularly there. So I have an e-card, but I also, as a citizen of European Union, I have a Croatian passport. So there are certain limitations of adopting your permanent status in other EU countries. But we are just fully registered, myself and my wife.
Brilliant. Garry, thank you so much for giving us your time. Do you have any final tips for people taking part in the Global Hack right now?
No, it's just a welcome message that I send. I find it's not just entertaining, but it's so encouraging, and I hope that it will be the most productive time in our lives, because now we just have to do many things that we desperately try to avoid, and I'm very, very happy to be part of that, and I have very good feelings about the outcome, though there will be the price to pay, and I don't want to sound callous. It's not about just jobs being lost for AI, on God forbid lives being lost to the virus, but it's about call for humanity to look for the future, and I'm happy that with events like the Global Hack, we're doing this very important job of drafting the framework of the future that will help us to get out of this crisis stronger and more resilient.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've talked about a lot of quite dark topics, but actually, do you think free people, free ideas, free markets will win in the end? Absolutely.
As I said in the very beginning of our conversation, I'm a staunch supporter of free market, and I believe in the unlimited power of free minds, and that's time to prove it again.
Garry, thank you for your time, and thank you for being part of the Global Hack.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And good luck for all the inventors who are joining us.
Thank you so much, Adam and Garry. I have one last question to you, Garry. What is the most interesting thing you are working on currently?
Look, I also use this opportunity of staying on the ground. It's the first time in my life that I'm not flying for, I think, the third straight months. I can't even remember when it's happened. Yes, because since I was 9 or 10, I was regularly flying and just playing events. So my plan is actually to work on the series of video messages that will form a core of my new book that will be tentatively called The World of Fake Values. I want to develop the ideas that we briefly discussed today, talking about us taking more risk and just revisiting certain events of the last 30, 40, 50 years and understanding why we caught so unprepared for this crisis. Plus, I have a few other chess recordings, so I'm just building a little video studio here at home just to make sure that from the next week onward I'll be able to start my video messaging.
Wow, Garry, I'm very interesting, or I'm looking forward to read your book.
So okay, that's the book that will capitalize on the books that I wrote before, but it's one where I hope I could present the big picture, both of the mistakes made in the past and also optimistic vision for the future, and advise how we can get there.
Cool. Thank you so much, Garry and Adam, and best of luck to you guys and to the teams.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.